welcome to another episode of The Influential Nonprofit. I'm your host. As usual, this is Mary Ann Dersch. If you don't know me, I work with nonprofit leaders to master the art of influence, and so they can ask for and receive anything they want without feeling the big three things that we don't like: rejected, ineffective, or pushy. And today I'm with Carol Hamilton of Grace Social Sector, and we're going to talk about strategic planning. Carol is the host of the Mission Impact podcast, and you help organizations and teams become more strategic and innovative for greater mission impact. And you facilitate strategic planning, mapping an organization's impact, and service audit for nonprofits and associations. So welcome, Carol.
Well, thank you. Thanks for having me on.
Okay, before we start with the content, I always ask the first question, which is, tell me something that you're proud of that you don't get to brag about a lot.
Well, I probably do brag about this one a fair amount because I'm definitely a proud mama. But since we're recording this on my daughter's birthday, even though it won't get published on her birthday, but in her honor, I'm definitely very proud of her. She is in the nonprofit sector, recently moved over into the philanthropy side. So she's helping get money to nonprofits now, and just always inspired by her perspective and the work that she does. And even more fun that she made me a grandma in the last couple of years. So,
oh, see there. Oh, that's lovely. Thank you for sharing that. And how cool it is that she kind of, you have the legacy now. Your nonprofit legacy, right?
As she was going through school, I wouldn't have expected it at all. But circumstances meant that she took a year off took a gap year after high school and did City Year, which is an AmeriCorps program.
Yep.
It really changed her perspective and changed her trajectory. So had a huge impact. She's been in the college access and then workforce development field for a while now.
Awesome. Okay. So let's get into strategic planning. So most organizations aren't like, woohoo, we get to do our strategic planning.
Yeah, I was with a group last week doing their retreat, and the checkout at the end of the day, I wanted ask people for reflections, and many of the comments were, I normally dread strategic planning. I normally hate it. This was actually fun. This was engaging. This was interactive. I got to know all the people on the board better and the staff. And, we had really productive conversations. So it was good to hear, but not so great to think that I'm the nonprofit equivalent of going to the dentist.
And I'm going to say, in the past, I had like some pretty difficult dental phobia. I like to say in the past, right? Or sometime. And so I get that. And so it's something we don't often look forward to. How did you get involved in helping organizations with strategic planning?
Yeah, so I've been in the sector most of my career, and I'm one of the strange people that when they said that we were going to have a strategic planning retreat, I actually got excited about it. I loved the conversations that we got to have. And also then, watching the person who was facilitating the whole process thinking, oh, that's something I'd like to do at some point. And so got a degree in organization development, which gives me the kind of bigger, wider perspective on just how do groups work together, how to make groups help groups and organizations be more effective. And, when I came out of graduate school, it was kind of like, we learned all the things, but it took me a while to realize, well, just because we learned all the things doesn't mean I have to do all the things. Because organization development can mean anything from individual coaching, working with teams, working with organizations. And I think it was doing the Clifton Strengths, or the Strengths Finder assessment, where I was working with a team and we were clustering their strengths around the 4 categories that they have. And one of them is around strategy. And I realized that almost all of my top strengths were in that strategy column. And I was like, maybe I should pay attention to that. And strategic planning was what originally brought me into wanting to do this work. And so let me come full circle and really hone in on that.
Yeah. So I was going to ask you what your superpower was, but obviously we got that. And like, so I did StrengthsFinder, and my top one is woo, which is like, because this is right. That's what I help people do, is turn up the woo and influence, right? So
I
I always
probably
love
need help with that. I'm guessing my daughter's probably woo is in her top 5. I'm guessing that it's in my bottom 5.
One of my top ones is empathy. My husband's last one is empathy.
Well, opposites attract, right? So we complement each
I
other.
mean, he's a very kind, fun, easygoing person, but it was like that was the bottom, like, whoa. And that is, so sometimes with our kids, I know he's grown a lot. I have to tell you, we have 3 kids. They all have challenges, right? And my middle one especially has gone through some pretty difficult things, and my husband has learned a lot about that, but it's not his default setting. We'll just say that.
Well, lifelong learners in my top 5. And I think that I always, am wanting to figure out how can I, what can I learn more?
Yes.
And that's one of the things that I really enjoy about doing strategic planning with groups, is that I get to do a deep dive in their world and the issues that they're facing, the trends that are impacting their field. And so, with every group that I get to work with, I'm learning more and more, which is so much fun for me.
Right. Okay. I want to ask you let me get my question here. My question is, how do you do your process that's different from other organizations, or what's special about your approach?
Well, it's funny. I was working with a copywriter a couple months ago, and she asked me the same question. I was like, well, I'm not really sure, because I haven't done, other people's approaches. But I think what I heard from the group this last week, and what I've heard from other groups, is that, just integrated into how I'm facilitating the conversation. I'm moving people around. We're not getting stuck places. We're moving through the process. It builds one step after another. There's a logical progression that kind of, I almost think of it as like, you've got a Lego set and you're building towards a goal. And all of those things, we go open, we go big, vision, but there's a way that I help the group also kind of not just be on that end of things, where, oftentimes I think the frustration that people have with strategic planning is that you end up with this kind of pie in the sky document that really has no bearing on the current capacity of the organization. And so there's a way to have stretch goals, but then also really have it be realistic, so that people can see themselves in it and see that it's doable.
Right. It's like the balance of a bold vision with actually attainable things, because there's no sense in creating a vision that you can't attain. But, and also, it may be like, oh, well, let's just stay. Sometimes I see some of these people talk them out of good or challenging ideas because they get overwhelmed. Like they get, oh, I don't know how we're going to do that. Right. So one of the ways that I look at planning, I look at it as what, who, when, how. So when people say, oh, we need to find board members, how are we going to find them? They immediately default to how. And I'm like, whoa, let's step back. Who do you want? When do you want them? Because if I know who and when, the how will just like that solves a lot for the how. But I feel like people are like, they get an idea, and they immediately default to, well, how are we going to do that? We don't know. Well, then maybe we shouldn't do that idea. And so is that something you help people kind of sort out? Like if it is a stretch goal, or, that you can help people sort out that, what are the steps to actually, manifest that, like make that real, make that attainable.
Yeah. And I help them, and, focusing on, okay, what are those big things that we want to do over the next, 3 to 5 years? And, in terms of the plan, not wanting to get so far into the nitty gritty, but, what are a couple action steps that are going to move you closer to that? But then also, what is success going to look like when you've taken those steps? So how are you going to know that you've made progress? How can you say, okay, yes, we are moving in the right direction? What, where's their agreement? What does it look like when, in terms of that success? And a lot of times people will think of those, what are the KPIs? What are the metrics that we're measuring? And it's not always, sometimes it's numbers, sometimes it's X percentage increase or whatever, but sometimes it's just, we need a plan, we create a plan. So success is, we've done the thing. And now I've lost my train of thought.
No, we need a plan, we create a plan. All right. So here's the other thing. If there's somebody listening right now that like, oh my God, we don't have a strategic plan. Oh my, like what can they do? What is there?
Well, hopefully they will
like
not
a starter pack.
Well, what a guest suggested on your podcast recently, which was go to ChatGPT and ask for one. I mean, the purpose of a strategic plan is really to have the conversations with your group so that you can find where the common, what's your shared vision, and what are you seeing as the common pain points that need to be solved, and then what do you want to move forward? So part of it is the end product the actual plan that gets written, but a lot of it is those conversations that you're having, so that a lot of times I hear from groups, oh, I feel so, there's a sense of relief of, oh, everybody thinks that right now our volunteers have too much of a heavy workload, and it wasn't just me, or everyone's thinking that we need to really work in strengthen our anti-racism approach, whatever it might be. That gets out in the open. There's a space and a safe space, a braver space to be able to have those conversations, so that people feel, to realize that the things that they're thinking are actually the things that everybody else is thinking, and it makes it okay to have those conversations. So getting started, I think, just an easy way to get started is to just have conversations with each other about kind of what have been some highlights, what do you love about the organization, and using a model called SOAR. So a lot of people were saying, oh, thank God we didn't do SWOT. And if anyone's done strategic planning, they've heard the acronym SWOT, which is strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats. There's a flip to that, which is SOAR, strengths, opportunities, aspirations, and results, which really focuses in on what's working in the organization and how can we build more of that, instead of getting stuck in what can be very overwhelming when people start listing the weaknesses, the threats. It doesn't mean that you're ignoring those, but it really sucks the momentum out of the conversation.
I totally agree with that. And because words matter, and things only have the meaning that we give them. Right. So we're going to perceive something as a strength, or we're going to label that thing. This thing is good. This thing is bad. But it's really just a thing. Right. And it's like, and it can be good or bad. Okay. Overworking. Okay. Our volunteers. Okay. But that is just information. I don't have to label it as good or bad. It's just right. Like for me, that's the thing about strengths and weaknesses. Like, it's just those things that happen.
Well, right. I mean, in organization development, when we're, oftentimes the very first thing that I'm doing with clients is having conversations with everybody, whether it's, one-on-one interviews or focus groups, or, asking people to fill out a survey. And all right, I don't know what's wrong with me today, but that's
okay. When you're working with the organization, you have them fill out a survey, like strengths. And what I'm going to tell you is the same thing I like. If I do evaluations, I'm saying, tell me what you like and tell me what you didn't like. I don't even know what you didn't like.
It's all data. So ultimately, it's all data. It's just a snapshot of where you are.
Right.
And it's not, even if you do list weaknesses, or, I ask them, if you had a magic wand, what would you want to change with the organization, which brings up all the things that, well, it could be better if, that, it's just where things are right now, and then gives you a platform to then have a conversation. Okay, what do we need to do about these things? What matters to us? And then the other thing that I do differently than probably a lot of people, I think a lot of folks start out with a conversation around mission and vision, and I actually flip that and put it at the end. And the reason that I do that is that I find that those conversations can really, again, it's kind of a momentum drain. And so by putting it at the end of a process or a retreat, whatever it might be, whether it's in person or a series of sessions online, that conversation about mission and vision, why do we exist, what are we ultimately trying to do, is informed by all the other conversations that I've led the group through. And so it just moves much more quickly. Like, you're already 95% there in terms of your consensus of how we see the group, how we see its purpose, how we see what we're trying to do. And I just find that it actually becomes like a nice wrap up to the whole process.
Yeah. So we're building consensus, and then from that consensus, we're creating this vision, which then it's sort of the big finish, right? The 11 o'clock number, right? This is how, and everybody's like, whoo, really excited and energized in that vision.
Yeah. And most of the time, I'm working with groups that are a little more mature. So they have a version of this. They have a mission statement, they have a vision statement, but they may not have looked at it for, 5 years, or this group of board members hasn't looked at it recently. And so it's just like, okay, given everything that we've said, given what we know about the state of the organization, given what we know about the state of the world, and the things that we're prioritizing over the next couple of years, is there anything that we need to update in these statements about our bigger purpose to reflect that current reality and where we want to go?
I think the word, when you were speaking, it's like embody the mission. I can read it, I can know it, but like to feel it, right? To just feel it inside, the body, like really like, oh, and be excited for it. I see that too in the work that I do, and it is very exciting, right? And people really get connected to the work. That's not just from like reading a mission statement or even just knowing it. It's just like really feeling it. And that for me,
I think what you were saying before about the how, that people want to go there, is a lot of, I think in the past, mission statements tried to include the how. And again, by doing it at the end, we've already mapped out the how of the big things that the group's going to do. So they don't feel the need to kind of cram into the mission statement too, because they know it's covered somewhere else. You know what I mean?
Well, and we know from 2020, 2021, the how completely changed. And guess what? We still realized a mission. I think that for me is the biggest lesson. Like any plan that you had in 2019, and you still figured it out. Right? Because it's less about the holding that vision, right? And like, okay, the how can change. One of the concepts I work with a lot is the medicine and the cure. This is my coach taught me. When people will swallow any medicine if the cure is strong enough. So the idea is and we tend to, and I'm speaking from marketing and fundraising perspective, get a little bogged down in the how, the medicine. We do this, and we like, no, it's the cure, it's the outcome. Like what are we creating together? Right? What are we creating? And it's more than what are we eliminating? So if we're eliminating like homelessness, or eliminating, right? What are we creating on the other side of that? What would our community look like if everyone had a home? Right? Like really grounding, not just because it's easy to get, for me, I think the easier question to say is, oh, we want to stop this, right? This thing is not helpful. We want to stop, like animal abuse. Okay. Oh, then what would our community be like if every animal was cared for? And it just, like, for me, that is the higher level question that I see very much excite. Like, what are we creating? What would that world be? I worked with an organization that did grief support for kids. What would living in a community be like if people could have honest conversations about death? Like that. And it's like, oh, and then you really can explore, what are we creating? Because it's not the medicine that people get excited about, it's the cure. right? They don't, I think from a marketing, and this is a communication, people don't care how you do it. They don't care how, they just want it done, you know?
Right. Right. Yeah, for sure. And so yeah, what is that bigger vision that what's the change that you're trying to see in the world, and what's going to be different? What's that going to look like? So those are a lot of the questions that I'm asking people. So, I think it's 3 years from now, and your organization is thriving and doing amazing work in the world. What does that look like? What's going to be different? And that kind of pushes people out of just we're going to do X, and then we're going to do Y, and then we're going to do Z, which is important to map out as well, but to go to that bigger space first, and then be able to drill into a little more of the details.
So, because one of the, I can't remember who said this, like a battle plan rarely survives contact with the enemy, right? So a strategic plan, rarely survives like contact. No, like how much of I guess the thing is there a balance, or do you see it as a balance of a plan, but also like making changes or adaptations?
Absolutely. I mean, we talk a lot about it being, a work in progress, or, it's a document. It's not just because the board has voted on it and said, yes, this is our plan for the next 3 to 5 years, doesn't mean that it doesn't change, doesn't need to, shift. Having a couple questions, I often give clients a couple questions to ask on an ongoing basis of, what have you succeeded in doing? What is no longer relevant? What do you need to delete? What's happened that you need to add? So that you're always having to adjust it. It's like the GPS, where it's like recalculating. I mean, it's not static. And then the other thing that I do with groups, and I learned this from Lapiana Consulting, created something called the strategy screen. So I want every group to also have that in addition to their plan, and that really gives them a set of criteria for making decisions about all those things that they couldn't anticipate. So, if they had finished their plan on January 2020, and then everything happened, and they needed to completely look at a new reality and a new how, then that kind of tool would help them for all of those things that you can never, a strategic planning process is only ever a snapshot in time, and it really needs to start being a practice in the organization versus just an event.
Right. So when I was on a board, when we would have the board reports, and they would put in not the plan, but they would pull out, hey, like this is this program, this is this program's goal here, and I hope I want to be able to describe this right. So they basically different milestones or different things that they were working on within the plan. And they would put this in the board report, and we would talk about it at board meetings. Like, hey, here's this strategic goal. We're this, here's how we're doing on it. Here's what's going well. Here's what we want to improve on. And we were able to, but it wasn't the whole plan. They were basically like, kind of, here's the chunk, here's what we're working on right now, or this chunk, as opposed to, this program or fund development or whatever. And I thought it was really helpful for me because the plan didn't just live in the plan, like it got pulled out and popped into different things. So it was omnipresent almost, are there tools or things that you have for organizations to use so they can just put it on a shelf, and we don't put things on shelves anymore, but it goes into a file in your computer.
It gets lost in a Google Drive or a Dropbox folder and never seen again. Yeah, no, I think those are the kinds of conversations that I have with staff and with the board at the end of the process of, how are you going to keep this alive? How are you going to integrate it into your, ongoing decision making? I also encourage groups to not do really nitty gritty implementation planning for more than a year. For some groups, depending on the maturity of the organization, it may even be a 6-month time frame. And then you're looking at all the details. You're not worrying about the details of 3 years from now. I think, when we used to have those huge binders where everything was cross-referenced and people were trying to say that we were going to do XYZ thing 3 years from now, and nobody knows. Like, don't even bother. So for those detail-y things, really have a shorter time frame, but then also have a practice, have a process for bringing it back to the group so that you're reviewing it. How are we doing? And, what of this is and isn't still relevant?
And is the time frame you work with for a strategic plan, you said 3 years? Is
3 to
that
5 years. It
3 to
depends
5?
on the group.
Mhm.
It depends on the group. Oftentimes I'll see a group do a 3-year plan that takes them 4 years to finish. Sometimes it goes faster. It kind of depends on what's going on, but that's a general time frame that I'm not. It just depends on the circumstances and what their comfort level is, and what their practice has been, whether it's 3, 4, or 5 years.
Yeah, I love the idea of having the plan for the big vision, the big movement, and then doing the implementation in smaller things. Because here's what I see. Okay, so I'm always interested in the thoughts and feelings that go into these things, because sometimes I think, oh, if we have this plan and we outline everything, and then that gives me a sense of certainty, or security that this is going to happen because we've mapped it all out. But it's a false sense of security, right? Like, there's no certainty, right? That's
If we haven't learned that in the
I
last
know,
couple of years,
right?
we haven't learned anything for sure.
And so, like, so I think, what is the purpose of the plan? That's like, if I wanted to relieve anxiety. Okay, so what's the anxiety about? Anxiety is about the unknown. The plan, right? I'm looking for a plan to make me feel better. Like, I worked with this board. They said we don't trust each other. They were really having some struggles, and I said we want a plan. And I said, okay, that's great. Anyway, and I said, so, but they thought the plan, if I had a plan, that then we'll trust each other. I said, why don't we work on trusting each other and that place of trust, connection, possibility? Then we create a plan. They were like, oh, and I wasn't the person to really help them with that plan, but I was a person to help them, have those conversations and really get connected so they could create the plan. But because one of the things that I work with people on is, we want the external to solve for the internal, but actually it's opposite, right? Like, if I have that confidence that I know, like that inner confidence of uncertainty can feel turbulent, but also it's okay. Like, we've got this, we'll figure it out. And not it's going to be okay. We're okay right now. That's something I talk about all the time. So in that, of like, oh, the plan is a great guide, but I don't need it to like feel secure. I don't know, but I do feel like sometimes people create these very elaborate plans because they want, especially in fundraising, they want that certainty. You know what I'm saying? Like, and there just isn't. There just isn't.
There isn't. That is the truth. And there are times when a lot of people, that's the only thing they think about, or think the only way that they think they can get help from consultants is to do a plan or do a strategy. And if the group doesn't trust each other or really conflicted, I mean, there's just a bunch of different times in the life of a group when planning is not the appropriate thing to be doing right now.
Yeah.
What's behind that distrust? What's happened in the past that needs to be, resolved or processed, that's underlying that sense of distrust and conflict within the group. So working through some of those before you try to move into planning is going to really serve the group well. Other times that aren't good times is, oftentimes that same sense of control or anxiety is actually when a leader is leaving. They will want to do a strategic plan. And I say, no, you can do a short-term plan, for whatever amount of time it's going to be before your transition, and then maybe plus 6 months for the new person. But it's really up to the new person to help be part of and help, shepherd that new plan for the organization. And you need to trust as the exiting person that that you're leaving things well enough that a new plan will emerge functionally in the group with the new leader.
Yeah. Yeah, I that's really interesting because I hadn't thought about, hey, there's times you don't want to do your planning, right? This is not a good time. Do you come back, like, do you do like, retool every year, or is there a process that you have or that you instruct your clients to do? Like
I
you
give
do it
them
like a
some
yearly
tools.
update or whatever?
Yeah, I mean, I haven't. I leave them with tools that and make sure that they've had conversations about how they're going to do that and how they're going to keep it up to date, how they're going to integrate it into their regular staff planning processes, regular board planning and conversations, all of that. And so and hopefully with those tools they're able to really integrate. So I'm probably working with a group every 3 to 5 years when they've completed that plan and then
You're like,
need
it's like
need to
seeing an
move
old
on to the
friend,
next
like a
one. It
reunion.
is.
Oh,
Yep.
hey,
Yep.
look what we did. Okay, let's do it again.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah. And it's so much fun to see the progress that organizations have made that, were just an idea in a conversation a couple of years ago. So to be able to see the things come to fruition is exciting.
that is very cool. So one of the principles I work with is that, like, the change, how we create change is attitude, action, accountability. So attitude is how we think and feel. Action is what we do, and accountability, right, is what systems or structures are we going to put in place. And that's what I'm hearing, like, and what I believe is, like, I don't care what it is as long as you pick something, right? So
Exactly.
it's not like, here's how you're going to be, kind of like whatever feels comfortable to you is fine with me, as long as you commit to it and hold each other accountable for it. And I feel like that makes it work better because I'm choosing, right, how I want to be accountable. Marianne or Carol's not telling us we have to do it this way. This is the energy of choice. We're choosing this system or this structure. And I feel like that, for me, it makes a huge difference.
Yeah. And by that time that I'm having those conversations with the group, I've learned a lot about what their culture is, how they go about things, how either informal or formal they are. And so whatever we discuss is going to be informed by what's going to fit in their culture, I always want it to be really as easy as possible to fit into things that they're already doing versus yet another thing on the to-do list. If we can just add it, every 3 months, we're going to make sure that it's on the board agenda, that we take a look at the plan and where we are and, ask a couple strategic questions and have a, revisit and have a conversation, whatever it might be, whatever's going to work. It's going to depend on how they normally work, what their practices are, and what's going to fit in kind of with the least resistance so that it doesn't feel like a huge lift all the time.
Yeah. So when I was on this board and we would get the strategic plan, and then they would have, like, here's the thing, here's the goals. It was a table. Here's the activity, here's the goal, here's what we're doing. And then when it was done, we'd get a checklist. Then we go to the next thing. And it was because I was I was on the board. I was mostly, of course, doing development, marketing, supporting that. But and it was nice to see done. It just felt like it was alive, right? It just felt we're working through this. And then when we, finish a task or like achieve whatever was on that plan that would be fulfilled, okay, then the next thing would come up, and working through it. And it was a really good sense of accomplishment. And that gave you energy then to go do the next thing. Okay, now we're going to tackle this next piece. Oh, okay, that's cool. And then you get to see the checks go off. And then, because in this organization, I don't know if they're all they would typically work their way out of their strategic plan before the time was complete.
Which is great. Which is great.
Yeah, but I think it's because it was so present,
Mm-hmm.
and it was part of our everyday conversations.
Yeah.
And we're thinking, okay, what does the plan say? What are we going to do this or not? What does the plan say? Can that give us some guidance? It helps you to make those everyday decisions about where you want to put your time, energy, resources, all of that. Or is this part of it? If it's not, well then what is the purpose of it? Not that it couldn't be. I'm just saying we're questioning, is this going to help us achieve one of these strategic objectives or initiatives? If not, what are we doing?
Right, because I think that there's the flip side to wanting to plan to have that kind of sense of control, is not wanting to plan to not feel hemmed in.
Yes.
But then I feel like the organization ends up being kind of a ping pong and reacting to whatever's coming at them. And so instead of saying, this is what we want to achieve and this is how we're going to move forward, it doesn't mean that you're not paying attention to the things that are happening. Like I said, using that other tool where, typically in that decision-making tree or that strategy screen, one of the first things will be, how does this align with our mission? If it's a new thing that couldn't have been anticipated during the planning process, and oftentimes what will happen is, especially influential board members, someone who's particularly persuasive comes in, is very excited about a new idea and says, we should do XYZ. And, if they're well-liked and networked and persuasive, the group can kind of get swept up in that. But then that rubric will essentially give you a checklist to say, okay, well, I hear your enthusiasm, but how closely aligned is it with our mission? How closely aligned? Does it support the strategic plan? Does it, does it enhance our reputation in the community? Will we be able to move this forward and get support for it? Do we have the capacity? Do we have the human resources? So just having a common checklist that you're kind of running everything through so that you're not just swept up with that enthusiasm.
Yeah. So, you're not saying no to the idea. The checklist is.
Exactly. It depersonalizes it too.
Yeah, it does, right? It allows you to, it's not about you having an idea or it's like, well,
Right.
let's look at the plan. Is it part of the plan? Because I feel like that happens a lot. A board member like, oh, I went to this event. It was so cool. We should do that.
Or an executive director or a staff member that, I just went to this conference and I heard this
so cool
new idea, So it helps kind of, okay, great, cool new idea. How does it fit?
Yeah.
Does it align or is it more of a shiny object?
Yeah. All right, awesome. This has been great. And we are running out of time. So anything else, last words of wisdom or anything you want to share with?
Yeah, I think, thinking about strategy and strategic planning as a practice versus an event. So, you get that plan. It's not tablets from on high. You were a group of people who created it together. You can edit it. You can iterate on it. But it gives you some guardrails. It gives you some parameters to make decisions. So I think that's the value that I see, and how people, learn more about the organization, learn more about the mission, learn more about each other through all of those conversations that lead up to the actual writing of the plan.
Awesome. Thank you. That I love that because it is living. Now I'm a big believer. I have an overall plan. But I also do like 90-day. That's how I work. I do 90-day, plans, quarterly. You have the overarching thing, and I find that helps me to look at that big goal and then bring it down. Okay, what are we going to do this quarter? This quarter. That's just me. And I tend to I'm a person whose default setting is make it up as I go.
Well, I think the truth is everyone's default setting is that. Life is improv. Life is improv.
You're right. There's some people who really love the plan. I love a plan, but I also like to move in the moment, right? And I think there are some people who are like that, and they would just come up with ideas or excitement, and then, oh, okay, it's a great idea. It's not its time. Right? It's a
Right,
great
right. And
idea.
where
And just
where do you have a place to capture
not
all
this
those
year.
things?
Let's revisit that, thing. Like, so I can hold that enthusiasm and then just like, yeah,
You can get
let's
some things done too,
yeah, right.
versus just having yet another wonderful idea. I mean, the
So
thing that I just don't see a deficit of in the nonprofit sector is good ideas.
good ideas.
There are plenty of those. It's what are
Yep.
you actually going to get done?
It's which ideas and how do we get them done? All right. So last question, as always on my podcast. You're in Maryland, I'm in St. Louis, but we ever wind up at a karaoke bar together, if you hang out with me, the chance of that is pretty high. What is your go-to karaoke song, Carol?
Oof. Okay. I haven't done karaoke very often, but I've done it with my sisters and I do love it. It's so much fun.
It is.
Um, I think Bohemian Rhapsody.
Wow, you're just gonna go for the big number.
Well, the very first time I did karaoke, I tried to do a Frank Sinatra song. I had no idea how difficult that song was to sing because I'd only sung along to it and it was terrible. So never did that one again.
Well, Bohemian, everyone's gonna sing along. See, you got to do the songs where everybody sings along, and then it's kind of like a piano sing along, and it's less like you.
Sing along, and there's just a great opportunity to ham it up too.
Yes,
a lot of melodrama in that song.
It's not about the vocals. It's the overall performance, right?
There you go.
My one of my best friends is, I have a philosophy, which is, I won't swear on this, but F it, I'm 50. And her F it, I'm 50 was, she has this little band, this little rock band, she's 56, I'm 57, and she plays little bars or whatever. And she's like, Marianne, I just think of you when I sing because I was the one who taught her how to have like full body performances, because she would just plant her feet and sing. And she's like, I'm trying to move. And so that's because when I first started, I wasn't very good. But you can always put on a performance, right? You can always put on a show. All right, Carol, how can people get in touch with you if they're interested in more about what you do? It's gracesocialsector.com. And where do we find you?
Yeah, so gracesocialsector.com. You can reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'm definitely active there. And then check out Mission Impact, the podcast. And sometime later this year, we'll be having Marianne on. So I'll be enjoying that conversation. So Mission Impact, check it out.
All right. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you next time on The Influential Nonprofit.